Welcome to Clonakilty for round one of the Napa Auto Parts Irish Tarmac Rally Championship. A full park fermé this morning. It's going to be some incredible racing this evening with 4 stages, 2 in the daylight, 2 in the dark. Let's get into it.
The West Cork Rally has been running since 1977 and has secured its place as one of the best events in Ireland. With the unfortunate cancellation of the Galway Rally due to storm damage, the West Cork became the opening round of the 2025 Napa Auto Parts Irish Tarmac Rally Championship. The stunning town of Clonakilty played host to the rally, and the surrounding lanes are where a top-class entry battled over 3 days of competition, with 18 challenging stages lying in wait for the crews. Keith Cronin, winner of the event last year and the championship, knew that 3 days of rallying meant he could afford to bed himself in on day one.
It'd be good to get into a good rhythm from the start, but there's time if you don't get into a good rhythm from the start. You know, it's a long rally, punctures can happen, people can make mistakes, so it's a really long rally. Me included, so it's a really long rally. Just try and get into a good rhythm early and see where we are.
Matt Edwards finished second here in 2024 and is no stranger to the event. But with a brand new car and a number of new stages on the itinerary this year, a good result couldn't be taken for granted.
There's a lot of new road over the weekend, so yes, we've got live the land familiarity and that sort of thing, but it's not a guarantee of pace, so we've just got to try and make it all come together. The work we've done the last week, we've had a high-end engineer over this week who's been really good, and we tried some things that have unlocked a bit of comfort rather than speed, if you know what I mean. So if we can get that comfort back into these first 2 stages tonight, then that'll be good.
Frank Kelly led the modified crews away from the start, but he wasn't letting that put any pressure on. He came here with realistic expectations.
Try and keep my nose clean and get through Friday. Last year didn't go well, didn't make it to Friday night. I really want to keep it clean and get through Friday. I have been in the car in 6 months now on Irish Tarmac, so no testing, no nothing. But as a blue Ascot, how hard could it be?
So, as the rest of the crews leave Parc Fermé, let's head out to the stages and all of the action from day one. Over the first day of competition, the top 5 wouldn't remain the same from one stage to the next. But the one constant over the 4 opening stages would be the rally leaders, Keith Cronin and Mikey Galvin. They set some good times to end the opening day with a 9-second advantage, a small but reassuring lead going into the second day of competition.
Yeah, it's good to be leading, but it's a really, really long rally. Anything can happen from here. Last 2 stages I felt, they were quick, but we were in a good controlled pace. But it's a long, long rally. I can't stress that enough.
Second place at the end of the day were Matt Edwards and David Moynihan. They'd been up and down the top few places through the afternoon, eventually settling on second. They felt they'd gone a little too safe on the tyre choice though, and it left them a little short of commitment on some of the fastest parts of the stages. By the end of the evening, they had a good feeling in the car and so were ready to push a little more on day 2.
40, 2 left shiny, go 4 right lead.
It's just a case of getting used to the grip on the... it's the first time we've had the 7s on the car on the stage, so just a case of building up the trust in that grip, because the grip is unbelievable, so you just got to disengage your brain a little bit to get the most out of the car. It's some challenge.
John Armstrong and Shane Byrne came to the West Cork as a warm-up for their first ERC round of the season in a few weeks' time. They weren't here for the championship, so they weren't going to factor in the points. Nevertheless, they were of course still going to want to win if they could. Unfortunately, an intercom issue over the first 2 stages held them back from a bigger push, but a stage win on the final stage of the day signalled clear intent.
Yeah, it's been a bit of an up and down day, but definitely not as bad as what it could have been without the notes and intercom issues. We didn't lose too much time. Keith was very fast in stage 3, but it was very nice to get a stage win on SS4. So
Josh Moffat and Andy Hayes were one of a few crews who were caught out by a jump on stage 1. It was a give-way junction on the recce, so they hadn't realised the severity of it. They got away with things though, and although the times were good, they didn't feel like day 1 had really gone their way. They ended the day in 4th. Eddie Doherty and Tom Murphy had some gearbox issues on the opening pair of stages. Thankfully, with a service before the next 2, they could look at getting that issue sorted. The next pair went much better, and they ended the opening day in 5th. We would unfortunately lose Jason McSweeney and Liam Brennan. They got caught out on that jump and crashed the Skoda off the road and out of the event on the opening stage. The crew okay, but the car going no further. We would also lose Daniel Cronin and Donica Burke. They went off the road on stage 3. They would be able to super rally again, but that would be it as far as a good result this weekend went. They'd been lying in 8th up until that point. Hugh and Averina Jeffries had a bit of a lucky escape on stage 1 when they spun the car and ended up with the nose in a ditch. They got out though and continued on their way with no damage other than to the tyres. In the modifieds, the early leaders were Simon Reed and John Murphy. They were finding the conditions slippery with the gravel on some of the corners, and while a wrong tyre choice didn't help either, they led by 15 seconds. And that lead would be over Porrick Egan and Ryan Thomas. They were struggling with the lack of grip too, and when the stage did have grip, there was a lack of commitment for fear of being caught out. They ended the opening day in 2nd. And in 3rd at this point were Vincent O'Shea and Thomas Ryan. It was a similar story. These rear-wheel drive cars were of course finding it harder to put the power down when there was a lack of grip. The podium places hadn't been this way all day though. In fact, on stage 1 it was Cian Walsh and Dylan Doonan who led the way, but that lead didn't last, and with the pair in class 13 and being disadvantaged with less power, it was understandable, so they settled into 5th. The RC4 class results would settle down from the very first stage, with Kyle McBride and Darragh Mullen opening up a small advantage by the end of the day of just 3 seconds. They were being a little cautious, especially towards the end of the stages as the tyres were starting to go off. Aaron Brown and Derry Long were finding the stages to be fast, but they were happy enough with how things were going, and with 2nd place in the class, they had every reason to be pleased with their progress. In 3rd place at the end of the opening day were Joseph Kelly and Cillian McArdle. It was 9 months since they were last on tarmac, so they had to be happy bedding themselves into 3rd place at the end of the opening day. So, with the opening day stages complete, here's a quick reminder of how the overall results looked. On to day 2, and the weather was still being kind to the crews. The problem with that was the speed, as many crews, including the rally leaders, Keith Cronin and Mikey Galvin, would beat the bogey time on the 2nd stage of the morning. Aside from that, the pair would have a good clean run, to be leading by 9.1 seconds as they went into service. That lead, however, wouldn't be over the previously 2nd place crew of Matt Edwards and David Moynihan. They were going well and had closed the gap to the leaders over the first 2 stages of the day, but it all came to an end on stage 7 when they went too wide on this right-hander and crashed their new Hyundai. The damage was enough to make continuing too much of a risk.
Yeah. Okay. Are you okay? Yeah.
So that promoted John Armstrong and Shane Byrne to 2nd place. They had the intercom working again now and were able to put in the kind of times they'd been expecting. They were enjoying the first visit to these stages, but they were another crew that beat the bogey time on the 2nd stage of the day. The loss of Edwards promoted everyone else behind, and that meant a move up to 3rd place for Josh Moffat and Andy Hayes. They were having a drama-free run so far and hadn't been in a podium position, so they would be looking to continue with that pace into the 2nd half of the event. Eddie Doherty and Tom Murphy were struggling a little with the tyre choice, opting for a harder compound in the morning, but they were taking a little time to get up to temperature. They were happy enough though with how things felt, and were doing their own thing now in 4th. Declan Boyle and Patrick Walsh were struggling to get the balance of the car right. Tyre choice and suspension setup were fighting each other and not giving as much confidence as they would have liked. They made some changes as the morning went on and started to see some improvement, but for now it would be 5th place. David Kelly and Arthur Kierans were struggling to judge the speed on the fast stages, which might account for the overshoot on this junction on stage 6. Apart from that, it was a good morning, and they ended stage 10 in 6th overall, just 2.7 seconds back from Boyle up ahead. And they'd have to deal with Boyle Jr. behind them too. Michael Boyle and Dermot McCafferty were just a handful of seconds back in 7th. They too had had a bit of an overshoot on the morning stages, but they set a good pace throughout the day. Karen McCourt and Barry McNulty had struggled to get up to speed in the car so far. It certainly wasn't slow, but they felt there was more to be had from the stages. A spin on one junction cost them a little time, but they ended the morning in 8th. Kevin Eves and Chris Melly were still getting used to being in the Rally 2 car after their switch from the modifieds last season. It was the high-speed sections of the stages where they were losing out, just not having the confidence to push 100% just yet. The times were still good though, as they ended the morning in 9th. And rounding out the top 10 at this point of the rally were Carl McCarthy and Eric Calnan. The event sponsor from the Clonakilty Park Hotel was already enjoying one of his best starts to a West Cork rally, and would be hoping that would continue into the second half of the event. Neil Roskell and Rob Fagg are taking on the Irish Tarmac Championship this year in a bid to improve their pace against the competition. They were having a good run to lie in 13th overall, but it wasn't all plain sailing. A spin on this junction costing them a little time, as they got it turned back around and on the way again. Brian Bolger and Martin Byrne would be having a little worse luck. They crashed over the edge of the ring stage, thankfully with minimal damage, and they did get the car out and on its way again, albeit way down the order now. And we lost Ronan Cray and Peter O'Sullivan when they crashed their Civic into a bank on stage 5, the damage to the front end preventing them from going any further. It was all change at the top of the modified results, as we saw Frank and Lauren Kelly gaining a few places to move up into the lead. They were pushing the famous Blue Escort to its limit in places, and it wasn't without its moments, but they took a 7.7 second lead. That lead was helped a little by a stall for Simon Reed and John Murphy on this corner, seemingly taking forever to get the car started and on its way again. They were having a few other moments and also an issue with the clutch, but were still clearly going well to lie in second. They were getting chased down, however, by Porrick Egan and Thomas Ryan. This was their first trip to these stages, and it was going well, although they did have an overshoot that lost them a little time, but that seemed to be the theme in the modified results for our crews on one stage or another. Kevin Kelleher and William Lynch were backing off a little on some of the higher speed sections of the stages. They were pushing hard, but there was a limit to how much they could push without things ending badly. They ended the morning in 4th place in the modifieds. And in 5th place now were Cian Walsh and Dylan Doolan. They were still leading Class 13 and mixing it with the more powerful cars. However, pushing that hard was taking its toll on the brakes, and the pedal was going to the floor by the end of a couple of the morning stages. No changes at this point in the RC4 class. Kyle McBride and Darren Mullen still led the way there, and the advantage was up to almost a minute and a half now, so the pressure would be off a little. They were keeping things neat and tidy to make sure they maintained that lead. There would be a change in 2nd place. Unfortunately for Aaron Brown and Derry Long, they broke a shaft on the last stage of this loop and would limp through to service, which dropped them to 4th in the class. That meant that Jack Brennan and Owen Doherty were the crew to take 2nd place now. They were having a good run and had some big smiles on their faces on today's stages. 3rd at this point were Joseph Kelly and Killian McCardle. They opted for a tyre choice that was a little too soft to start with, but changing them resulted in much better times on the remaining stages of the loop. So, we're 10 stages down here on the Clonakilty Park Hotel West Cork Rally, and it's all change in the results at the top. Cronin still leads, but it's John Armstrong now chasing him down.
Keith, day 2 and still leading. How's it been going?
Yeah, it's been good. Trying to do our own thing now, as I suppose, from a championship point of view. Matt was the closest to us. He's gone now. We have a bit of a gap to Josh. I know John Armstrong is there, but he's not doing the championship, so I'm not trying not to worry too much about him.
This morning we're just having a good rhythm and carrying that into the afternoon now. Obviously Keith is a very good driver here down in Cork, so yeah, it's nice to be mixing it with him, and there's still a long rally to go. We're only really halfway there, so yeah, still all to play for.
Josh, 3rd overall with 2 stages to go in day 2. How's it going out there?
Yeah, it's going grand. Yeah, we're pretty happy. Good steady pace and no big dramas. So
I've never seen everyone as happy in March with this weather. Everyone's smiling.
Yeah, definitely. The sun certainly helps, and you can see it out there with all the spectators as well. Like everybody is just a bit more happier with the sun, you know.
Frank leading the modifieds on day 2. How's it been going out there?
Yeah, it's been going savage well. I've been getting way too far carried away, so having to bring it back on a wee bit because we got a wee bit out of hand a couple of times there. That first stage out of the last service, can't even remember the name of it, Dunworley maybe.
Yeah.
couple of right butt clenchers in there now. I don't want to try and do that again. But no, the car's been fantastic. Tyres working real well. Notes are coming great. Just the driver's weak link as usual.
There were just 2 more stages to complete day 2, and for rally leaders Keith Cronin and Mikey Galvin, the pressure was off a little. They would of course want to win the event if they could, but their focus was on championship points, and they had almost 40 seconds of a lead in that battle now. The leader with John Armstrong and Shane Byrne wasn't quite as big, only 7.5 seconds, but Armstrong wasn't in the championship battle, so there would be no point trying too hard to keep him at bay. The M Sport pair were having a much better day too, and were putting in some good times as well. Josh Moffat and Andy Hayes were the closest of the championship crews that Cronin needed to watch out for. They were having mixed feelings inside the car, as they were happy with the pace on some stages and not so much on others. The variation in the character of the stages not helping with the rhythm at times, but for now things were going to plan in third. Eddie Doherty and Tom Murphy still felt a little bit like they were in no man's land, so they were just trying a few new things on the car in order to get it how they wanted. The times were still promising though, as they ended the day in 4th. And with their car more how they wanted it now, it would be 5th place to end the day for Declan Boyle and Patrick Walsh. No more issues, and the pair were happy with how things were looking going into the final day. David Kelly and Arthur Kierans were getting faster as the day went on, happy with the pace and not wanting to push to the wrong side of those fine margins out there on the stages. They ended the day in 6th. There wouldn't be any issues for Michael Boyle and Derek McCafferty. They were still trying to overhaul Kelly up ahead and get closer to Dad on the results, but for now they were having to settle for 7th place. Catherine McCourt and Barry McNulty thought they had a puncture on this loop of stages when they clipped a wheel. They got away with it though and managed to reach the end of the day in 8th overall. With some new tyres on the car, Kevin Eves and Chris Melly were getting used to things and able to push a little more. They were still a little way off advancing any further up the results, but for now it would be 9th. And rounding off the top 10 would be Cal McCarthy and Eric Kalman, still enjoying the trouble-free run they were having so far. In the modified battle, it was still Frank and Lauren Kelly out in front. The gap had reduced a little though, the pair not wanting to push too much and do anything silly on the final stages of day 2. They led now by 4.4 seconds. Simon Reed and John Murphy were trying their best to catch the leaders, but they were struggling, especially with the inconsistent grip in places due to the gravel being dragged onto the stages. They were happy enough to close the gap though, and still in with a chance on the final day. We would unfortunately lose Porrick Egan and Ryan Thomas from 3rd when they retired the car on stage 11. So that promoted Kevin Kelleher and William Lynch up to 3rd place. They'd had a scare at the start of stage 12 when they couldn't get the car started, but fellow competitor and leader of the modifieds, Frank Kelly, helped to get them going. True sportsmanship is what this championship is all about. No change in the RC4 class for Kyle McBride and Darren Mullen. They were having a nice tidy run through these stages to extend the lead a little more by the end of day 2. There would be a change in 2nd though, with Joseph Kelly and Killian McArdle now in that position. They'd had a bit of a lock-up and overshoot on the first stage of the loop, but that didn't matter as they still moved up the leaderboard. That move in part would be down to another overshoot for Jack Brennan and Owen Doherty. Theirs must have lost them a little more time though, as they dropped back into 3rd, but there was only still 3.6 seconds in it. Joining the event on day 2 was the historic rally, and it would be business as usual for Thomas and Eric Davis. They didn't feel quick in the stages, but clearly they were. They ended the opening day of competition with a 5.4 second lead. Just behind them were Neil Williams and Eamon Hayes. They'd had a bit of a moment on stage 10 that damaged the front end of the Escort, losing them some time in the process. They would settle into 2nd place for now, but would be glad they were still in the event, and the crash hadn't been anything worse. Philip Rogers and Martin Henry were having a good run. They ended the opening day in 3rd and had a good feeling in the car, but there were places on the faster sections where they spent a little time bouncing off the hedges. Wayne Evans and Denny Greenley were taking some time to get back into it, feeling a little rusty over the first few stages, but things started to pick up for them as the day went on. They ended the day in 4th and were just 12 seconds back from the podium places. And for Tommy McDonough and Paul Murphy, it would be 5th. The car wasn't geared for some of the fastest parts of the stages, so they were struggling a little. So with day 2 completed, here's a reminder of how those results are looking here on round 1 of the championship.
Looking forward to today?
Yeah, looking forward to today. Another tough day ahead of us. Look, we're kind of since I know we're leading the rally, but realistically we probably shouldn't be leading the rally with the bogey times yesterday. Like we've probably backed off a good bit since Matt has gone, because he was at the time the closest in the championship. I can't see us leading the rally. Like I'd imagine John will have us by the first service easily enough. Like I just don't want to get caught up in the fight with him. I have to focus on the championship.
I'd say you've said that to yourself 100 times. I still don't believe you.
I don't think Mikey believes me either. It's just trying to go. Not look. I will try to push clean and fast, but I just don't want to. I don't want to go to the level that, like, say I was at Friday night. I don't want to be driving at that rate, because you're taking risks then. But as I said, the first round of the championship stood to us last year when it came down to it, so I have to just try to keep that in my head. As you say, it's easier said than done. I can say it all I want, but I just have to try to get that into my head.
On then to the final day of competition, and by no means an easy one, with 6 more challenging stages before the crews reached the finish. And over the morning we witnessed a shake-up as John Armstrong and Shane Byrne took the lead of the event. They felt the times were okay, but they were enough to switch around the advantage and give them a 17.7 second lead going into the final loop. That, of course, meant that it was a drop down to second place for Keith Cronin and Mikey Galvin. They didn't mind that too much, though, as the championship points were the important thing, and they still led the way there. A bit of a moment on the first stage of the day also caused them to back off a little, the car just suffering with a bit of understeer in the faster corners. With the changes up ahead, there were no dramas for Josh Moffat and Andy Hayes. They kept going as they were, sitting in no man's land a little, and just getting through at the usual pace now to try and maintain that third place to the finish. It was a similar story for Eddie Doherty and Tom Murphy, although they did have a big moment on stage 13 and would back off a little after that. They ended the morning in 4th. Declan Boyle and Patrick Walsh were happy with things now. The car setup was close enough, but there was still a little bit to be done on the fastest sections. They had an overshoot on the final stage in the loop, but they ended the morning in 5th overall. David Kelly and Arthur Kierans were still trying their best to catch the pair ahead, and they brought the gap down to just 6.2 seconds now. They were pushing too hard at times, reporting a few moments in the middle stage of the day. Karen McCourt and Barry McNulty had a big moment right at the start of the stage in the morning, enough to knock a water bottle out of the back of the car and into the footwell. They would back off a little on the next stage as they regained confidence, but would end the morning in 7th. Kevin Eves and Chris Melly were gaining a little confidence stage by stage, but some of these tests were still a little bit too fast to really open up the car as much as they wanted. They end the morning with a gap of 19 seconds to McCourt up ahead, so it was probably a bit too much of a risk to try and push for that over the last 3 stages. Especially as the gap behind them was a little bigger, with Cal McCarthy and Eric Kalman now just over a minute back. They were just staying out of trouble now. A good result on their home rally was on the cards, and they didn't want to do anything to throw that 9th place away. Rounding off the top 10 now were Owen Murphy and Jonathan O'Mahony. They'd been struggling to get up to speed over the first 2 days, not helped by some suspension troubles. But with some help from Race and Rally, they got some new dampers on and were able to push the car a little more, moving up the overall results in the process. The modified battle was still going strong. Frank and Lauren Kelly being able to open up the gap a little more once again. Even with a small overshoot on the final stage of the morning, they led with a 19-second advantage now. And that lead would still be over Simon Reed and John Murphy. They'd had a big overshoot themselves, mishearing a note on the final stage of the loop and ending up losing around 7 or 8 seconds in the process. They still held on to second place though. As for third place, well, that would change, as we saw Damien Toner and Joe Comerford having a steady and clean run to climb up the results and into that third place for now. In part, that would be due to Kevin Kelleher and William Lynch dropping down to 5th. A smell of gear oil in the middle stage of the loop caused them to back off, but nothing was found when they got to the end of the stage. Kyle McBride and Dara Mullen were enjoying the good lead they had in the RC4 class, giving them a chance to try a few things in the car and just maintain the lead. They did have an overshoot on stage 13, but with a healthy lead, it didn't matter in the great scheme of things. We lost second place Joseph Kelly and Killian McArdle on this loop of stages. They hit a chicane in the Peugeot and went no further. So for now it would be second place for Jack Brennan and Owen Doherty. They felt things were a little too slow, but they were doing enough to take second place on this stage. And it would be a place they could guarantee as well, as long as they had no problems. Their closest competition now coming from Callum Graffin and Mark McGeehan, who were over 2.5 minutes back in third. They were having a less than ideal weekend, but at least they were still going and were now in a podium position. So, with just 3 more stages remaining, let's remind ourselves of those overall results after stage 15.
John, you're a man on a mission this morning. You've taken the lead, 17.7 second gap.
Yeah, it's been a good morning. Bit of a tricky morning, like the grip levels have been a bit inconsistent, so I think me and Keith have been trying to manage that, but yeah, we seem to make the most of it and take time out of him. Stages today are really cool and fast and bumpy as well, especially Sam's Cross, so yeah, we'll just see now how the next loop goes and if we can manage the lead.
Keith, you've backed off a bit this morning. How's it been going out there?
Yeah, look, we're trying to. We had a moment at the start of the first one out, so after that we've just backed right off, and we'll just try and consolidate our championship points. So yeah, the same again now for the next loop. We'll try not to take any risks.
Still leading the modifieds this morning. How's it going out there?
Yeah, it's going well. We had 3 good stages there, but it's a lot of gravel. These Mark IIs with 9-inch slicks, they want to get up on the gravel, so we had a few hairy ones where I knew it wasn't connected to the ground anymore, but we got away with it. I'm sure the rest of the lads are having the same bother. Amazingly, we've extended our lead a wee bit. It's far from comfortable, it's just one boo-boo, and Frank does do Frank things, so we'll just try and keep, the boss is going to try and keep me under control for 3 more stages.
When I spoke to you yesterday, you said you were going to back off and none of the other boys believed you. So I think they were right. You were a man on a mission in that last stage yesterday.
Well, no. I did back off a wee bit in the last stage. We had a small problem. Alternator went and light started coming on the dash, and I didn't know what it was, and it took me a while to compute. And while I'm computing that, I can't multitask, so I wasn't listening to notes. So we had to slow down basically. But no, we were lucky where it happened at that point of the stage to get us out of the stage and get us back to Park Ferme. So I'm a lucky man. I know I'm a lucky man.
Best of luck for the last 3.
Cheers.
Kai leading the Rally 4 class at massive time. How's it going out there?
Yeah, going very good. We've built up a good lead there at the minute, so it's just trying to manage that lead now, I suppose, to get to the end of the day. And yeah, we have 3 stages done there now, and yeah, the last stage was very, very tricky, very loose, very bumpy. So yeah, you could call it very handy. So we just had to get through it steady and clean. So we repeat the 3 we did now. So go back out and just try and get round it is the main aim of the game now at this stage. So yeah, try to get to the finish now. It's been a long weekend, and yeah, we've been able to push on rightly on yesterday and on Friday, but just trying to get around now at the stage.
On to the final loop, and before we look at the overall results, a quick peep at some of the classes and other categories. And in the historics, it would be 3rd place for Tommy McDonough and Paul Murphy. They had a big moment on one of the jumps, but apart from that, they loved the weekend. The earlier problems were enough to make sure that 2nd place was all that Neil Williams and Eamon Hayes could manage. The times were close to the leaders though, so if it hadn't been for the issues, they would have been fighting for the win this weekend. But that meant the win would go to Thomas and Eric Davis, a great result and a relatively trouble-free weekend, the Welsh crew topping the results in the championship once again. Day 3 would see the juniors joining the event, and it would be the first ever rally for Owen Sheehan and Dara Lynch. They hit a chicane in the morning but got away lightly, ending the event with 5th place. Cian Hines and Carl Fallon were finding it hard to commit in some of the stages. The bumps and jumps were throwing the car around, but they did manage to work their way up the results and finish in 4th place. This would also be the first event for Niall Gowan and John McLaughlin, and they were clearly ones to watch, finishing on the final step of the podium on their first time out. They were so fast at times that they were catching other cars in the stages. The fight at the top was close, and it would be Ronan Dorian and Mickey Joe Brown who took 2nd place at the end of the event. They got as close as 9.1 seconds to the lead by the end of the day. And in that lead, taking the win this weekend, were Dara Walsh and Gary Lombard. They pushed as hard as they could throughout the day and managed to take the win here in West Cork.
Dara, you maintained your lead all day and took the first place in the junior category here in Clonakilty. Did you enjoy it?
Just a savage event now. Fair play to Davis and all them for putting on a serious event, but no, just about got home in front of Ronan there. Serious racing all day, and unfortunate about Kyle there going out at the start of the last loop there, but I know, good racing.
Is this your first time competing here?
Yeah, it's first West Cork, yeah. So
You'll be back next year?
hopefully.
A quick look at the class winners, and it would be the Class 24 win for Brian O'Neill and Richard Cleary. It wasn't without its moments, but the pair were happy with that result. In Class 22, it would be victory for Rory McGarrity and Tony McGovern. The pair had a trouble-free run to take that class win, happy with their performance throughout the event. Class 15 would see the Subaru of Alan O'Riordan and James Jordan taking the number 1 spot. They had a good advantage in that position too by the end of the event. Class 13 would belong to Kenneth Cullinan and Robert O'Regan, and it was clear the pair were trying, putting on a good show for the fans on the final stages of the event to take the class win by just 21 seconds. James Cullinan and Andrew Grennan got through the event relatively unscathed. Apart from a little damage to the front of the car from earlier in the event, they took the Class 12 win this weekend. Things had gone entirely to plan for Anthony O'Brien and Michael Laverty, as they did exactly what they needed to do for the 11R class win, taking that by over a minute at the end of the event. The 11F class would be a little closer, only 4.4 seconds deciding that, and it was Darren Young and Patrick Lawler who took the class win after a good run throughout the weekend. 10 months away from the stages didn't stop Michael Kelleher and William Buttimer from claiming a class win, and a good one too, with over 3 minutes of an advantage at the top by the end of the weekend. There would be just the one crew finishing in Class 9, so that would go to John O'Sullivan and Sean O'Crowley, who had a good, clean run in the Peugeot this weekend. And it would be a similar story in the RC5 class as well, with Sarah Hunter and Sean Douglas taking the class win there as the only ones left in the class at the finish. Casey J. Coleman and Adam Coffey would be in no man's land a little in the RC3 class. They ended the event in the lead of the class and by a significant margin. They took 18th overall as well. There wouldn't be any change to the RC4 class over the final stages, so third place would go to Callum Graffin and Mark McGeehan in the Peugeot. Jack Brennan and Owen Doherty kept hold of second place. It had been a good weekend for the pair, and a lot of confidence had been gained too, which would set them up nicely for the next event. But taking the win would be Kyle McBride and Dara Mullen. It was never really in doubt, but they couldn't relax until they crossed the finish line. As in this sport, anything can happen. In the modifieds, we'd see some changes, but not for Damien Toner and Joe Comerford. They'd moved up into third place on the previous loop and were able to keep hold of that place to the finish. Sadly for Frank and Lauren Kelly, it would be second place. They'd held the lead for a good amount of time, but a misfire on the final loop saw them drop back a little and finish in second, 7.3 seconds back from the win. Taking that victory would be Simon Reed and John Murphy. They'd been pushing all weekend and were never more than a handful of seconds from that top spot. Taking a win due to issues for your fellow competitors is never the way you want to do it, but to be that close all weekend, it was certainly deserved for the pair.
Simon, first place finish in the modifies here in Clonakilty. Had you a good weekend?
It was a brilliant weekend now, yeah, and to be fighting at the front all weekend was even better again, so we had a good old push with Frank all weekend, so.
A great battle was had, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. To go into the last stage, we were only 1.2 between us, and to come out on the better side of it, so better again.
Back to the overall results, and rounding out the top 10 would be Michael Boyle and Dermot McCafferty. They'd unfortunately slipped down the order with a puncture earlier in the day, putting an end to them getting closer to Dad Declan, but at least they were still there and secured a finish. Owen Murphy and Jonathan O'Mahony had a good run on the final day and were happy with the pace. They'd have liked to have been there earlier into the event so they could challenge for the top of the results, but 9th place was a good end to a long weekend of challenges. Cal McCarthy and Eric Calman scored a great result here on their home round of the championship. They moved up to 8th place overall by the finish and were more than happy with that result. Kevin Eves and Chris Melly were trying right to the finish. A small overshoot on the final stages, testament to the push that they were on. They ended the event in 7th and happy that they were getting used to the car a little more stage by stage.， Catherine McCourt and Barry McNulty had some last-minute dramas. A spin on the first stage in the loop and then some damper issues on the last meant they had to back off a little on the final stage to get it home and would take 6th overall. Declan Boyle and Patrick Walsh had problems of their own. A big overshoot on the final stage, ironically in exactly the same place as they did on the previous loop, but they had no issues apart from that, and they'd end the event in 5th place overall. They were pipped to 4th position by David Kelly and Arthur Kieran's. A good push from them on the final stages and a clean run saw them manage to overhaul Boyle and take the place, finishing just 0.6 seconds ahead at the end of the event. Eddie Doherty and Tom Murphy had been in no man's land a little, unable to really gain a place and looking safe enough not to lose it. They got through the final stages with no dramas and ended up in 3rd overall. And the same could be said for Josh Moffat and Andy Hayes too. They didn't do anything silly, guiding the car round at a fast but safe pace to take 2nd place in the points this weekend. On to the overall win then, and here's where things get complicated. For 2nd place, Keith Cronin and Mikey Galvin, it was all they needed for the championship points. They drove accordingly, especially with the car suffering understeer, as a push for the overall win wasn't worth the risk. That meant that fastest at the finish of the last stage would be John Armstrong and Shane Byrne. A good run saw them taking the overall win of the event on the timesheets. However, an issue after the stage finish would mean the car couldn't make it back to the final time control under its own steam, and outside help given from the fans meant the pair were excluded from the final results, handing the overall win to Cronin. A disappointing end to what should have been a thrilling victory, but to finish first you have to finish. Of course, with all of this being decided after the events had finished, there was still some uncertainty at the finish. But we caught up with Keith and Mikey to see how they felt after taking maximum points this weekend.
Keith, a long, tough battle here in Clonakilty this weekend, but did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was good. It was good to get the top points. As I said, once Matt Edwards went out of the rally, that became our main target because we had been fighting very tightly with him, and that probably took the edge out of our driving a little bit. But yeah, it was good to get the maximum points. As I said, that was the target at the start of the weekend, and to get that's a good start to the year.
Great. Mikey, what are your thoughts on the weekend?
Very, very exciting weekend. It was an adrenaline rush in a big way. It was this rally is so fast and so wild. Yeah, it was incredible. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting few hours here to see what happens next. But yeah, we're happy. Look.
Steve, sun was out, big crowds, brilliant weekend here in Clonakilty this weekend.
Yeah, huge support. As I say, great to see all the spectators out on the stages. The weather came along on board with us this weekend, so it's great to see, and great competition out there today. As I say, the crews really enjoyed it. Their favourite stages, my personal favourite probably is Ardfield and the whole lot. So as I say, it's great to see.
I think the crew's least favourite was Sam's Cross.
Look, had to shake it up a small bit and see what they say, but as I say, it's something we knew we tried this year, and we'll probably go back to somewhere similar next year, but we'll take a look at it then at that stage.
So that's it for round 1 of the Napa Auto Parts Irish Tarmac Rally Championship. Next up, the crews head north and the Circuit of Ireland in a few weeks' time. Killian and the team will be live throughout the weekend, and we'll have a full roundup of the event soon afterwards. Thanks for watching, and for now, goodbye.